All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Hannah Townley, and I'm a student assistant with the Bob Graham Center for Public Service, and I would be your host this evening for our program in partnership with our friends in the Beyond 120 program. Before we kick this off, I just want to go over tonight's agenda and some quick Zoom housekeeping. We will first hear from our panelists, and then we're going to go straight into Q&A. I'd like to ask that we all keep our mics muted unless speaking, and either use the chat feature or the raise hand function to ask questions. Please feel free to send your questions to the general chat or directly to me. And if you would like to speak to ask your question in the Q&A portion, just activate the raise hand function and we can mix back and forth between verbal questions and then questions from the chat. We will be recording this session and it will be sent out and posted on the Graham Center website. All right, without further ado, we are pleased to host two Gator grads to speak with us about their careers in local government. Our panel includes Karissa Raskin, who works with the City of Gainesville Office of Strategic Initiative, and Kathleen Kauffman, who is the Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Gainesville. Please join me in giving a big round of applause and a virtual welcome to Karissa and Kathleen. So whichever of you would like to go first, please take it away.
Karissa, I'm happy to go first if you want me to.
Sure, Kathleen, take it away. Go for it.
So Hannah, you would just like me to tell them a little bit about my history in government?
Yes, just a little bit of how you got started working in local government. What does your job look like, and what are some of your favorite parts about working in public service with in the local government sphere?
Okay. I have 2 degrees in historic preservation, one from Mary Washington College and in Virginia, and my graduate degree is from the University of Florida. And I jumped into public service immediately after my graduate work. I went to work in Tallahassee for the state at the Division of Historical Resources. And that was an incredible entry-level position because working for the state offices for historic preservation, I was able to really get a wide variety of experience of preservation issues from around the state. And then I went to be the historic preservation officer for several cities around the state of Florida. Lake Park, which is in Palm Beach County, Fort Pierce, which is in St. Lucie County, and City of Miami. After the City of Miami job, I was the historic preservation chief for Miami-Dade County for almost 10 years. And I had decided at that point, I find it very interesting that I'm a panelist for this particular topic because after almost 25 years in public service, I decided I was never doing it again. And I quit my position as historic preservation chief at Miami-Dade County, and I started my own historic preservation consulting firm. So, and I also did a few years in the nonprofit world. I was the executive director for the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. But I find it very interesting that after 4.5 years of running my private firm, I ended up back in public service. Now, why did that happen? I loved being a private consultant, and it actually gave me such a different way to really enjoy the industry that I picked, historic preservation, because I was actually out doing a lot of projects and it was on me to get them accomplished. And sometimes in local government, you can get bogged down with like just keeping the day-to-day tasks going and putting out fires and that sort of thing. But when the City of Gainesville had their historic preservation officer position open, I didn't think twice about it. I immediately went to apply for it, and here I am. And I'm so grateful to be back in Gainesville. One of the things that I think really is interesting about public service is that more than any other industry, in my opinion, you have the ability to affect serious change on a widespread basis because we are dealing with local laws and regulations and city ordinances and different things like that, where if your work helps promote and push those through, that is something that affects the entire community. And so I was really, really anxious to come back to Gainesville in order to help the city really hone in and dig deep and figure out what it is they want to do historic preservation wise around the city. And working for the local government absolutely is the best way for me to be able to affect that kind of change. So
Yeah, just a quick follow-up question though. So many of our students don't know or aren't familiar with historic preservation officers. Can you tell us a little bit about what the day-to-day looks like and why is that an important role for a city government to have?
super great question. Thank you, Hannah. I forget that not everybody is a freak about historic preservation like I am. So in general, let me just tell you in general what historic preservation is about. It's about the preservation of our historic and archaeological resources, and that could be a building, it could be a site, it could be a historic landscape, and it could be entire neighborhoods. So I'm sure most of you have heard of the historic districts. And something that a lot of people have a misconception of is the whole notion of being placed on the National Register. Maybe you hear of buildings or districts being on the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register is highly honorary and it's really difficult to get on there, and that's a wonderful thing to have. But being on the National Register does not protect a place at all. People can still demolish it, people can still alter or wreck a landscape or dig up an archaeological site. So the real power, the real authority comes from local ordinances. And so when a city enacts a historic preservation ordinance, that's what gives the city authorities to create historic districts or designate individual sites of significance. And then that allows me or a historic preservation staff to then monitor those sites and to make sure any work that goes on there is done in a way that won't ruin the historic character of the building or district. So a lot of my day-to-day activities involve reviewing permits that people have applied for, because if they live in a historic district or they're a designated individual site, we need to review what they're doing, right? We need to make sure that they're not going to tear an original roof off or replace windows with something that's really non-compatible with the historic structure. So we do that a lot. We help with grants throughout the city. And right now, actually, I'm getting ready to review our historic preservation ordinance to make sure that it's got the framework and the foundation that we really need in order to have a powerful historic preservation program. So I am doing a lot of policy reviews. We are in the middle of doing our comp plan amendment update and the comprehensive plan, and that has a historic preservation element in it. So we're making sure that for the next 10 years, a comp plan is done every 10 years at a city, a comprehensive plan. And it kind of guides your efforts, your city's efforts for the next 10 years. So I want to make sure that historic preservation is absolutely something that is recognized and honored and dealt with in city policy.
Wonderful, thank you. And Karissa, would you also like to tell us a little bit about how you got started in the city government? What does your job look like in the day-to-day? And what are some highlights of your work with the City of Gainesville?
Thanks, Hannah. I would love to. And so, hi, everyone. My name is Karissa Raskin. I am the Civic Collaboration Supervisor for the City of Gainesville. And that is a title that if you look across other cities, other communities, probably not going to find a Civic Collaboration Supervisor elsewhere. And so that makes my position at the City of Gainesville pretty unique in that my role is really structured around building partnerships between the departments that exist here at the city, but even more so looking externally to our city government and building partnerships across the different organizations, neighborhoods, institutions that are within our community. And I think, what drew me to taking the position that I have right now is that it is pretty unique. It's not something that typically you would find, and it's something that I think is so desperately needed within a community because we have all of these amazing resources in Gainesville, from the University of Florida to our nonprofit sector to individual thought leaders in our community and community leaders. And we're all doing such amazing work. And I find that so often we're so embedded in our individual work that sometimes we don't know about everything else that's going on. And so having a way to learn about what else is going on, make connections and make partnerships, we can collaborate to work more effectively together. And that's kind of the goal of my job. But my job is new and it didn't exist really before I stepped into the role. So as a little bit of backstory on myself, similar to what Kathleen shared, I stepped out of my graduate education directly into public service. But my graduate education is really what paved the way for me to get into this position. So I was a graduate of the University of Florida, and during my time working there, I just got as involved as I was possibly able to in various initiatives that were looking at how the university itself, both from a faculty standpoint and a student standpoint, we were engaging in our community here in Gainesville. Now, many of you, I don't know how many of you are first year versus seniors versus graduate students, but regardless, it can be very easy to, and I was guilty of this as well in my undergraduate years up at the University of Connecticut, becoming kind of in the bubble of the university and finding it difficult sometimes to step outside of that bubble. But really, when I was at UF, looking at opportunities for faculty and students to do the great work that we do as researchers and as students, but how does it impact directly into our local context? How are what we doing supporting our community? And that philosophy is what really drove me to take this position at the city, because it's very much the same. Looking at from our city government, how are we serving our community in a way that best suits the needs of the community and from a partnership standpoint. And so my background is from the university standpoint, my graduate degree, a lot about social science research, understanding how individuals think about the world around us, the perceptions, the culture, the influences that help us make the decisions that we do, and then identifying the opportunities for expanding kind of beyond what our norm is and working with other people to create social change. My field of study was specifically in community-based social marketing. And so through the position that I have at the city, able to really take some of the skills that I developed directly from my graduate degree and apply them in some of the work that I do here at the city. Hannah, is there any other questions you'd like me to dive into? It's kind of a broad summary.
Yeah, we just wanted to do a broad background on both of you so students know kind of what we're going into, but we really wanted to make this more of a discussion. We've already had a student reach out about a question, so if it's okay with both of you and you don't have anything else you'd like to share, we can just go ahead and get started with the Q&A.
That's good with me.
All right, Kathleen, is that good with you? Okay, wonderful. So I know we had a question from Mikhail. if you'd like to unmute and ask your question. And everybody else, if you have any questions, either raise your hand if you would like to ask it yourself, or drop it in the chat, or DM it to me if you'd like me to read it out loud.
Yes, hello. I'm a second year student trying to look into foreign policy, a work in foreign policy. Do you guys recommend any domestic work that kind of gets me trained to such a role or such a work in the future?
I think any, can you hear me okay? Okay. If you want to work in foreign policy, which several members of my family have done, it really does help to have a little bit of background in local government, actually, because you get to learn the structure of government here, which does nothing but support any effort you might have internationally or abroad. And just so the really interesting thing about local government, one of the interesting things, there's many interesting things about local government, but one of the cool things about working for local government is you get to see how things become policy, and then how it gets out into the community within the framework and the hierarchy of how that particular government is structured. So for us, it's like city commission and city manager, and then on down to the department heads and that sort of thing. So I think it would be, if you want to do foreign policy, definitely, and it really doesn't even matter what part of local government you go into. If you get some of that experience, it will be wonderful for any future in foreign policy.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Kathleen's statement. And Mikhail, I would say, through the Bob Graham Center, we actually fostered a partnership with the Bob Graham Center to have a fellowship program at the City of Gainesville. And so through my office and of strategic initiatives, and actually our city clerk's office, every year we have a application process, and through that application, a cohort of fellows who are brought on as temporary part-time employees of the city to do work with us on a variety of different projects. Some of them are heavily policy focused, others are more project-based or strategic programs. We even have some design students, because we have a big need to do effective communication and outreach in innovative ways through innovative technologies. And so we have some design students who are working with us as well. So my point in telling you this is, as a student, I think there's absolutely opportunities for you to get involved, whether it's through a formal paid fellowship position that you would apply for, or if it's even just attending some of our city government meetings. We have meetings every Thursday that begin at 1 p.m. and sometimes they last until 11 p.m. So you get a very long opportunity to get information and experience. But I think Kathleen is right. Government in some ways is government. And as much as you can get familiar with the process, it will behoove you in the future regardless of the institution that you're working under.
And just to add an answer to your question, Mikhail, there's a lot you can do with the city and immigrant services. With my research on language access and immigrant inclusion in the city of Gainesville, North Central Florida, I was actually at the Thomas Center where Kathleen works this morning for a meeting with the Gainesville Immigrant Neighbor Inclusion Initiative. And Jenny's a great program the city's doing. So if you have foreign interests, but you also want to get started working for local government, you should message me, because we need to find a research assistant to replace me when I graduate. But there's great opportunities like that to get involved on how global affairs occurs locally around the world. And the city of Gainesville is a stage just like that. A question from the chat. This is from Emma Sanchez. This is a question for Kathleen. How does balancing historic preservation with the continuous push to modernize our community work? How do you maintain an equal focus on both?
superior question that I could talk for hours about, but that is the challenge, right? Like, how do you save the soul and character of your community when obviously there's development pressure, not only from a growing university, but the developers who are trying to react to the need for housing and the need for just growing a community. So it's definitely a delicate balancing act. And that's when you really have to lean in and depend on the expertise and the power of the Historic Preservation Board and your own Historic Preservation Ordinance. Because as much as I would love to save everything in Gainesville, and actually a good historic preservationist will know you can't save everything. You just can't. You have to be logical about reviewing what can be saved and really what you should not waste your fight on. But I, as a city employee, as a government employee, and in my role as the preservation officer, I'm actually really limited to protecting resources unless they're actually designated as historic structures or districts. I'm limited to that kind of thing. So that is the difference between a city position for historic preservation and, let's say, like the community advocates, right? If you have a nonprofit organization for historic preservation, they don't work for the city. They can go out and they can say whatever they want to say. They can tell the commission whatever they feel about saving this building or that building. So just remember that when you become an employee of a local government, you are still a representative of that government, and you have to represent them in a way that would make them proud and that they would support, and that is allowable by the framework in which I have to work with, which is the Historic Preservation Ordinance. I can rely heavily on those people out in the community that I know would love to say something about saving a historic building or that kind of thing, but I have to let them do that kind of advocacy work if it's not something that I can legally try to protect. But it's a great question, and that is why I'm pleased to be in Gainesville. I mean, I would like to see an increase in the number of resources that we protect and areas. Currently, our little downtown is not really protected by anything. So, you know, these are all projects that are up and coming, but that's a great question. So thank you. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Kathleen. Everybody, please keep the questions coming in the chat. Our next question is, so what is one resource or class you think every UF student should take regardless of the public service career path they're heading down? So this is a question for both of you.
That was a tough question. Karissa, do you have any? I mean, it's easy to say, oh, take political science or take a civics one. Actually, you know, basic civics and just understanding the role of government and how ethics should be playing a part in government would always be great. For me personally, and I'm sorry I keep coming at you from the space of historic preservation, but that's what I know, right? So for me, one of the most beneficial things I ever did at University of Florida was take some law classes, particularly historic preservation law. And that was at the Levin College of Law. And it has impacted me so much in a positive way in all the different roles that I've had throughout my career, because you often go up against attorneys, you know, when you are in a commission meeting or historic preservation board meeting and they do not agree with something you're doing, you need to be able to really know how to dig down and read your ordinance and interpret your local ordinances so that you can properly defend your case.
So probably, there are a couple. Can't just say one. Cultural anthropology, definitely. I think everybody needs to take cultural anthropology because it is a practice of understanding humans, culture, and why, based on our past lived experiences and those of others around us, influence why we do what we do. Anthropology, study of humans. Humans are very unique, complex creatures. And as much as we think we might be rational beings, we're not rational beings. And I think that, understanding that all humans are humans helps with the lens of when you're dealing in public service. Everybody is still a human. We all have different opinions. We're all driven by particular motivations, whether it is our personal projects that we have a passion for based on, Kathleen, you said, I apologize for coming to this conversation with my lens of historic preservation, but don't apologize. That's who you are. That's the lens that you come with. And we all bring our own unique, our strengths and perspectives to the table. And that happens in public work, that happens in community work. And I just think cultural anthropology is a great way to set the lens from a cultural relativity standpoint and some layers of equity built in there. In addition to that, I would say that for any of you thinking about a master's degree, and there may actually be classes or maybe a way for undergraduates to take these courses too, I'm not sure, but check out the Master of Sustainable Development program at UF. That program is, to me, golden. It has, and McKeel, it has opportunities to learn about foreign policy, but it also in a local context. If any of you are familiar with the SDGs, which are Sustainable Development Goals put out by the United Nations, which kind of are drivers of change from a national and international perspective. This program at the University of Florida is one that helps to cultivate students into be change agents and leaders from a UN perspective. And so the introductory course, I'm forgetting the title of it, but I believe it's something to the effect of Sustainable Development Global Classroom. It's actually an opportunity for you not only to learn from faculty members at UF who have this great knowledge and experience working internationally and locally, but you have the opportunity to collaborate with students across the world who are taking this exact same course and studying things at the same time that you are. And if it's structured the same way that it was when I was a student, you learn about, or you have a Zoom meeting with students across the world every week to thought share and brainstorm solutions to complex problems with them. It's kind of like a macro version of what we do at the local level, but it's really, really interesting. So that would be my plug.
Those are both amazing suggestions. And I love that you said cultural anthropology. Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful, thank you. So the next question in the chat, this is from Sneha, and she says, I'm majoring in history. What would you say I could do with that degree in local government? So Kathleen, if you could start, but also Karissa, I would love to hear what your responses are for a career in local government with history degree.
Well, with history, that is interesting. So historic preservation in particular, obviously is architectural history, but generally historic preservation departments are so overloaded with applications from people with masters in historic preservation that we wouldn't go with a straight historian. So I think that, a history degree gives you a nice broad background as far as both how we got here, who we are, and that sort of thing. So actually, probably in the city manager's offices type thing, where you are in a function where you would have to deal with people and planning and working across tables, could be a good start, but I don't really know for a particular history degree. what one might focus on.
Or more broadly, because with a lot of liberal arts degrees, it's not your degree that matters, it's the skills that you learn in your degree and how you then are able to transfer them to the workplace that matters. So what would you say are some important skills that students need to develop either through their classes or through their extracurriculars? What are the skills they need to develop for a successful career in local government?
Definitely people skills. You are the face of the city for whoever you're interacting with that comes who comes in from the public, for any, no matter what department you might be working in, anytime you interface with the public. And that could be a very angry person who's dealing with a denial of a permit or some application, or it could be somebody that's coming to you for a very complicated matter. So people skills are just hugely, and it took me some time. It really did. It took me some time to really get to the point where I felt like it wasn't like attacks on me personally. You know, when people come in and they have issues or problems going on, they want to attack whoever ends up having to deal with them at the city. So the better you know how to deal with people will be 1,000% put you over the edge of someone that, you know, doesn't do it as well as you, and you can go really far with that. Karissa, do you have anything you want to add? I know that you do.
Yeah, so, and Hannah, I think you reframed the question beautifully, because that's exactly what I would say. It's not necessarily about the degree that you have. I kind of shirked around this in my introduction, but I'll tell you, my degree was from the University of Florida, for my master's degree was in agricultural education and communications. Now, how is that I am now the civic collaboration specialist at the city? It's not necessarily because of the degree per se that I have, but the skill set that I was able to cultivate and the amount of engagement that I sought out while I was a student and the type of engagement that I sought out while I was a student. So I think in any degree that you're going to take, especially as an undergraduate in a liberal arts degree, you're going to get an opportunity to, you know, take a lot of elective courses and explore. It's a lot of exploring when you're an undergraduate, and the opportunities to learn about clubs, to learn about different things that are going on in the community. Get involved as much as you can, because it's going to be that real world experience that's going to help you in your degree to know kind of the direction that you might want to take, even for a capstone project. But then when it comes to, you know, applying for jobs, whether it's with the city or others, exactly as Hannah said, it's going to be those hard and fast skills. So to me, what is history? History is a process of learning from the past so that we make better informed decisions going forward. At least that's one way of looking at history, right? The more we know about the past, whether it is, you know, hard and fast numerical information or more storytelling and what we might consider to be qualitative information, it's data. And so you use that data, and data becomes power, because you learn from the things that we have done to inform how we might do things differently, theoretically better in the future, and we make informed decisions. So if you can take classes that teach you about, you know, methodologies for data analysis, for understanding, really, I think that qualitative as well as quantitative data is really important, but storytelling is extremely important as well, especially from a local government perspective. Sometimes we deal with really complicated things. If you think about like the planning department, and we have zoning codes and ordinances and things that just from a community member's perspective may be full of jargon and unclear information, but from a historical standpoint, how you make those things interesting is by telling stories. And so the more that you can learn how to take data and past information and communicate it in a way that really speaks to your audience, which I think historians do a great job of, that can be a very, very powerful tool, because you're breaking down that information barrier, almost like a language barrier, between individuals who are recipients of city services and the individuals who are providing those services. So one opportunity you might want to seek out while you're in your undergraduate degree is the UF Samuel Proctor Oral Histories program. And they are an organization or a group at the university who does work to collect interviews and information of storytelling about the history really of Gainesville, of our community here, and how do we preserve those stories, tell those stories, and make sure that the culture of the community members who have lived here for longer than any of us live on and help to shape the way that we navigate our city going forward in some way, or at least preserve the memory of it. So those would be a couple of ways that you could get involved in community-oriented history projects now. I hope that helped.
Another thing you could do, with a history background, and it would be a great way to develop your skill set, is to make an effort to get on a board, an advisory board of some kind. The city has a ton of them, or even if not a city board, there's a lot of nonprofit organizations in the city of Gainesville that could really use, good people to help further their mission. And so in the process of that, you then learn also about how meetings are run and, rules of procedure and this sort of thing. And how do these boards interface with, even though they may be a volunteer board, how do they interface with the city government, and how do they affect change? And I think just having that kind of experience, even once you graduate, just to be able to say, hey, I was on the board for this nonprofit organization, or I was in some of our boards, including the Historic Preservation Board, we have a spot available for a student. Now they're a non-voting member, but it has a spot for a student. So that would give you a wonderful set of skills that you could then use to take with you after graduation that would certainly further your efforts in public service.
Yeah, and getting on boards are a great opportunity for all majors. So yes, whatever you guys are involved in, even though this was a history question, getting involved in the community and having those student positions, apply for everything, advocate for yourself. The worst you'll get is a no, and then you can just try again. But that's great advice for how to get involved. Our next question comes from Emma Sanchez, and this is for Karissa. How do you deal with challenges that arise when fostering partnerships between lots of different stakeholders that maybe have different immediate and long-term goals?
That is a very good question, because that is definitely something that happens, Emma. And how do you deal with it? Kind of go back to my answer for cultural anthropology. You remember that humans are humans, and I strive to remember that everybody is coming to the table with the best of intentions, that people have a passion, they have a perspective, and they're trying to do good work. Sometimes the end result of what it is that we're trying to accomplish is different, but usually there's some middle ground and some type of alignment between some component of what it is that we're working on, that we can discern if we take a step back and we break down what sometimes can be either a heated conversation or a misalignment based on miscommunication. And so when I bring multiple stakeholders to the table that may come from different backgrounds and have different views, I try always to establish a sense of everyone's voice here matters, and nobody is more important than anybody else. And let's, I take a philosophy of social capital. We're all going to get into this or get out of this what we put into this. And there is really room for everybody to get something beneficial out of it. And so trying to just give space for people to share their perspectives, share their needs, and not every single project is going to be right for all stakeholders, and they may choose to remove themselves from a particular initiative if they don't feel a sense of alignment. But I think the more we can allow space for conversation and collaboration, early on, and that requires early engagement. That usually allows people to know that their contributions are desired and they have an opportunity to help shape what it is that we're creating together. And to not take things too personally. That is definitely something that I think just as an adult, we all kind of have to learn.
Awesome. Thank you. And Emma says thank you at the chat.
You're welcome.
Another question from the chat. What is a moment that has been the most impactful for you of your career in the public sector, especially with the city? So this is a question for both of you, but Kathleen, would you like to start? What's the moment that's best encompassed why you work in the city and continue to work in the public sector?
So I won't give you an example from Gainesville since I just started here 2 months ago, but there's a lot of interesting moments. And before I tell you about a particular one, I will tell you this. I think it's incredibly important to move around. You know, I have worked at many different levels of government, the state, municipalities, and the county. And some have been better than others, but you learn something different from all those different experiences. And if you find yourself in a spot where you feel like your personal growth isn't happening anymore, or you feel like you're just not really feeling like you're contributing in a positive way, you know, move on and find a different community. And sometimes it's really about the people in the administration that are there to support you or don't support you. So one of the most fascinating things I had to deal with was at Miami-Dade County. And I was there for 10 years, and luckily we had great support from the mayor, but we also had 13 commissioners to deal with. That's a lot. And so sometimes you did not always have support for historic preservation from the commission. And that can be very frustrating because we all know, we know our profession, and we know that we are doing the best we can and we're providing the best guidance that we can. And it can be very, off-putting to have someone tell you, well, no, that's not the right way. So we had a situation arise where we were trying to save mid-century architecture in a community, in a municipality within Miami-Dade County that we had the regulation authority over. And there was this, to make a very super long story short, we had this super big clash between that municipality's local elected officials with us, even though we had the historic preservation regulation authority over that city. And of course, that wound its way up to the county commission, and the county commissioner for that particular district was really upset. And, at one point, we thought the entire preservation program at the county might have been in trouble. But we took that as an opportunity to say, well, okay, if you don't like this process that we have and that we did trying to save these structures, let's regroup and let's see if we can improve the historic preservation ordinance so that it works for you and it works for us in our capacity to be able to do historic preservation. So through a very, very long process, we ended up doing a complete overhaul of the Miami-Dade County Historic Preservation Ordinance. And it was adopted on my birthday in 2016. So that was it was a long, hard process. And you really had to just dig deep and use your self-meditation skills a lot of times to just, not go crazy. But in the end, because you were there to help affect that change, we got a historic preservation ordinance that actually was a lot better. And it had provisions in it that we never had before, and probably would have never been able to push through if not for the fact this one commissioner was super livid about another piece of it, and so wanted this big overhaul. So sometimes, you can really use the challenges to your advantage. And that was one that I had, and glad I lived through it, and glad that they now have a stronger preservation ordinance because of it.
Awesome. Yeah, the fight is long, but you got to keep fighting the good fight. Karissa, what example would you give of a moment that really encapsulates why you continue to work for city government?
So that moment has yet to pass, in the sense that this Sunday, I invite all of you to come out to Depot Park from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., a program that I kind of have been working on since before I started at the city, back during my graduate degree. And then postgraduate, I was a researcher at UF, as I explained earlier, working to help cultivate a stronger sense of true community-driven engagement from the university. And now I do a lot of that work at the city. So on Sunday, there is a celebration called the Celebration of Community Collaborations. And it is an event that is kind of showcasing what we have called the Partnership for Reimagining Gainesville. It is a model for community capacity building, and a mechanism that both the city and the university are supportive of to help mentor, provide technical assistance, provide micro grant funding to individuals in our community who have lived experiences of some of the most complex challenges facing the community, yet are not in positions of power and do not have access to the resources typically needed in order to take their amazing ideas for solutions and see them come to fruition. So through this program, this model, the Partnership for Reimagining Gainesville, we're able to help overcome those challenges and give individuals with great ideas some assistance in seeing their ideas flourish. And so we've been operating for about a year, and this celebration on Sunday is the culmination of our pilot year and kind of the launching into the future. So I'm very excited about this. It's been a really collaborative process. I see Sophia is one of our students engaged today on this meeting, and actually shout out to Sophia for helping one of our community partners that works with the Partnership for Reimagining Gainesville, and being an amazing example of a phenomenal student who has taken initiative to get involved. And I implore her, and I implore others for helping to do this great work. And that will be my moment.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you have your moment coming up. I need to take a part. I need to be a part of this.
Well, everyone is welcome to come.
And Marianne put in the chat, Karissa, if you could send us the details, we'd love to include that in our student newsletter. We can send it out to all of our students so they get those details, and hopefully we'll have a big turnout on Sunday. Awesome. Our next question comes from Anna in the chat. She says, what is your biggest hope and goal for the city of Gainesville? Kathleen, if you'd like to start.
My biggest hope for the city of Gainesville is that the people who are out there, and I know they're out there because I talk to them on a daily basis, that are concerned about good growth management and considerate growth management, particularly right around our historic resources and districts, have a wonderful and positive way that they feel like they can take part in the process for future planning. Right now, a lot of people feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the community ends up finding out is happening or is, a development project, and from when those first get approved or started or anything like that. So, Gainesville is a really, really interesting place with a fascinating history. And I'd also love to really be able to find new ways to educate people on that history so that more people are just willing to stand up and support the preservation of our historic structures. We all are, a lot of us here are very proud of this town. And, sometimes you feel a little bit helpless when you see big projects going up, but I want to make, through the Historic Preservation Office, I want to be able to make a very fair and diligent effort to have everybody heard.
Wonderful, thank you. And Karissa, what's your biggest hope or dream for the city of Gainesville?
Oh my goodness, that is a loaded question. I don't have one dream, I don't think. I guess broadly, I would say that trust can be rebuilt between large institutions like the City of Gainesville and the University of Florida and some others, and members of our community who have for quite some time been left out of conversations and decision-making processes. I would love for us to have an opportunity to work more collaboratively across our decision-making bodies and the individuals who are our community, that are our city, and acknowledge the past with an open mind and opportunity to move forward in a trustful, mutually beneficial, and reciprocal manner, in a way that provides necessary resources to all members of our community. The work that I do focuses on social determinants of health a great deal. I work a lot on food accessibility and food systems and food sovereignty. Those resources should always be available to individuals, and individuals should have the opportunity to choose what they eat, how they eat, and never have to worry about when they're going to eat. That is not always the case. Same could be said for health equity, same could be said for housing, education, and I guess my hope for our city, and I would venture to say more broadly than our city, but the city is where we work and live. So to see all partners, individuals, the city government, institutions, nonprofits, private businesses, public entities, coming together in a collaborative spirit to pool collective resources for the capacity building and resourcing that's needed, especially to individuals who have for so long been without. Yeah, big goal.
Awesome. Well, if no one else from the chat has any final questions, last call before we ask our last one. Going once, going twice. Okay, well, our last question, we wanted to end on something fun and sentimental because we all love Gainesville. What is your favorite thing about Gainesville? Karissa, would you like to start?
I mean, I think we've come full circle now. So we asked how we got involved in our jobs and why we love our job. And I started by saying I'm civic collaboration specialist. That doesn't exactly exist other places. So right there you see, Gainesville is pretty innovative. It's a really unique place. Not everywhere will you find opportunities for partnership across institutions and individuals and neighbors. And it takes a community being responsive to that type of innovation, being, thoughtful and progressive. And I think what I love about Gainesville is that there's no shortage of innovative thinkers and problem solvers and a true passion for doing good work. So it is definitely the people that I love the most.
That is a fantastic view of Gainesville and definitely the people. And I would just add one part of that is I love that it's such a diverse community, because you have the universities and you have all this wonderful influx of different cultures between the faculty and the students and the staff and all of that. But you still have this very interesting history of the people who actually are from Gainesville and grew up in Gainesville and their families' histories. You have a very rich agricultural history. You have a very rich African-American history. And as we are now seeing, there's actually a very rich Native American history that there's indigenous peoples that are trying to get their history more brought to light. So you have all this confluence of people, and yet to me, and I was born and raised in South Florida. I'm from Miami and lived there the last 16 years of my life, but I was totally done with that kind of scene. And I love Gainesville for the fact that even though there is very much opinions on both sides of the table, there's still a lot of politeness and common courtesy, and just it just seems to me there's more of a willingness for people to work together. And I'm super hopeful that I can get more involved and become one of those people that helps really bridge those different communities together. For me, it would be through the preservation of historic buildings and resources and landscapes. And for Karissa, she has such a broader view on like interacting through the different organizations that are out there. But it all really comes down to the people. And of course, for me, Gainesville, it's so funny when people complain about traffic in Gainesville. I'm like, are you serious? Like, just go to Miami for one day, and then you can complain about the traffic in Gainesville. So for me, it's just a beautiful, beautiful community.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both so much. All right, Marianne, if you'd like to put up our final slide so we can close it out. But thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Kathleen and Karissa, for taking time out of your schedules and your evenings to be with us and share your experiences working for the city. So everybody, please be sure to check out our upcoming events. Speaking of the City of Gainesville, we're actually hosting a redistricting workshop on December 7th. We hope to see y'all there. It's going to be an in-person event. Our final career conversation is coming up. We're going to have Gators Going Global, living and working abroad. So for those of you who are asking questions about how local government can work for a career in foreign policy, well, we have some international specific opportunities for y'all coming up. We're also going to have a talk about presidential power, Truman and the Steel Crisis. That's going to be over Zoom on December 1st. And then also we're going to have an event with one of our grad dissertation fellows. Someone mentioned they're interested in history. One of our grad dissertation fellows is going to present on queer histories and its impact on the tourism industry in the state of Florida. Another cool talk that's going to be December 3rd, and that's going to be an in-person lunch meeting. All of these events and more you can find on the Bob Graham Center website, and you can also sign up for our email so you can get newsletters whenever we have fun events to share. And we also share internships and job postings. We're also going to send out a recording of tonight's program and other details tomorrow, but please reach out to us if you have any questions. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Bookmark our website so you can follow all of our events. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely evening, everybody, and we hope to see y'all at an event soon. Thank you.